want to get started because we have just till 6 o'clock to have this wonderful class. Welcome to our first Jamaican curry class, and a particular welcome to Tamika Francis of Food and Folklore. I'm super thrilled.
Right away. Okay, go ahead, Claire. I'll make sure this works.
It's cool. We're here. Of course, on a virtual platform, we have technology to grapple with. You know, we are here at Curio, we are still very new at pivoting onto this online platform. So I'm really happy that you all are here joining us and going with the flow and understanding that all of us are in this together, figuring it out. But at Curio Spice, we have been doing classes for the past 3 to 4 years, basically since we started our brick and mortar shop in Cambridge. Of course, the brick and mortar shop has been closed since mid-March due to COVID, and we've had to pivot everything online. But that also means we can be a little bit more flexible with our audience. So I know we have a few folks joining us from outside the Boston area, so I'm super psyched about that. Feel free to mention in the chat function where you're tuning in from. It's kind of fun to see where everybody is joining us from. And I'm just really honored that we're able to continue this class series because it's so important to our community and so important to you to be able to offer our education and storytelling throughout this experience. So I want to introduce Tamika Francis. We have been so looking forward to this class. I'm really thrilled, and I think the timing is especially awesome. Tomorrow being the 58th, I think you said, independence of Jamaica. I'm just still admitting folks. Here we go. So welcome to those of you just joining us. But Food and Folklore and Curio share a lot of the same values in storytelling and honoring the origins of where our food comes from, and particularly where these food traditions originate. Tamika has done pop-ups all over the Boston area with different chefs representing global cuisines, and tonight we are going to hear her story and hear about the traditions of Jamaican curry. So I'm super excited, and we will have time at the end for a little Q&A. So after Tamika does her demo, we'll be able to jump into that. So I'm just going to switch the video here, and Tamika, you can take it away.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Claire. I'm super excited, even though I keep fixing my audio and everything. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm super excited. As Claire mentioned, I'm Tamika Francis, the founder, I like to say head cook and bottle washer of Food and Folklore. It's a startup project based mainly in Boston, and it's my love story of sorts to Boston. I've been there for around 15 years. I have a love-hate relationship. Sometimes I love it, some days I go, I wish there were things that were different. And so as an entrepreneur, I decided to work alongside some colleagues to solve this problem of not being able to find really good, authentic food stories that demonstrate the variety of food cultures across the world and those folks who are in Boston. So we've been doing a dinner series that has been halted because of COVID. We continue to share our food traditions. My own experience is grew up as a farmer's kid, but also in the urban center of Kingston, moved to Boston in my early 20s, and just really connected to food, farming, and like wholesome traditions. My mother's family is Maroon, so jerk was invented by them, so I've always just really paid attention to cooking methods. So really excited about curry tonight. I like to share my story of curry. If I could put on my resume, on my CV, a skill of mine, I can carry curry goat, my favorite thing to eat, from Montego Bay, which is in the west of the island, 3 hours on a bus to Kingston with minimal spill, right? I used to buy curry goat on my way home from work when I worked across country. It was just always a wonderful thing for me to eat. It just really is warming, it's nostalgic. But curry for many people is spicy, It's confusing. They're not too sure. Is it a sauce? Is it a spice? Is it a dish? Is it a way of cooking? We're not sure. I like to engage folks in my daytime job. I'm a facilitator. Kind of raise your hand if you think curry is a spice. Half hand. Okay. Raise your hand if you think curry is a cooking method, a way of cooking. Okay. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
Just make sure.
Yes.
Can you just make sure there's nothing blocking your mic on the iPad?
Okay. Sure. How's that for you?
That's a little better.
Okay. I also have an AC on, so I could turn that off in a second. Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, great. So yes, the answer is yes. Curry is both a method, but also a spice blend. So curry is one of the most confused culinary, I'm gonna chop onions while we talk. One of the most confused culinary terms in the English lexicon. It's both the way of making food. So it depends on what region you're in. Curry might be a blended spice of various powders. So turmeric being the main one. If you're in Southeast Asia, you may have a red curry or a green curry. It's more of a paste and it's wet. And other places, in particular in India, curry refers to how you make food. So any protein braised in a heavy sauce with lots of spices is a curry, right? So the answer is yes. It's both a spice blend, and it's also a way of cooking. But there's also curry leaves, right? Which tends not to even be in a curry. So many folks are like, hey, but curry leaves make a curry. No, curry leaves are somewhat separate. My own experience with curry as Jamaican, as being from the Caribbean, is what's called an Anglo-Indian curry, primarily Madras. Madras is also our national fabric. The British West Indies Company would send spices, fabric to the West Indies. I'm not sure they had GPS then. Things got confused. Would arrive in Jamaica, but it was intended for the British West Indies, for India. So our Madras region was where many Indian servants in particular came after post-slavery in Jamaica. And so callaloo curry and many Indian spices and dishes came from that region. The three countries, so about 3% of our population is Indian. However, in Trinidad and Guyana, about 40% of their population is Indian. So very, very heavy curry and also Indian influences. So for tonight, I'll keep chit-chatting and telling you tidbits. We're gonna do a curry chicken, right? And some folks say chicken curry. In the Caribbean, we tend to refer to food by the method of cooking. So curried chicken, stewed chicken, jerked. So usually the descriptive comes before the food. So it's no different from a chicken curry, right? It's just the way we tend to speak. We use a descriptive as the beginning. So fried plantains versus plantains that have been fried. So a curried chicken is really just a chicken that's been curried or braised in lots of spices. Curried goat is our unofficial wedding food. If you have a large celebration, wedding, funerals, engagements, if there is no curry goat, you're judged very heavily. You haven't had a good party if you have no curry goat at your party. In Trinidad, the same thing. On street sides, curry is sold as roti, so a flat bread with curried chickpeas rolled into a burrito style, and then that's sold as street food all across the Caribbean, but mostly Trinidad and Guyana. All right, so let's talk through tonight's recipe, and you'll have this in email once Kara has that out. We're gonna do a chicken curry. I have a few things here. I have just like on TV, I have my chicken that's been marinated. I did not add the curry here. The salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. I also have some carrots. I have some potatoes. I have some white onions or yellow onions. Red onions may not be the best one for this, just that it's a little bit sweeter and it tends to also take the color, which ends up being a purple blue color. So white onion. I have a little bit of oil to start. Any fat would be good. Coconut oil is really good. It gives a really nice toasty flavor. I have whole habaneros or Scotch bonnet. These are treated very carefully, very, very high on that spice scale. I'm gonna pop these in whole and then remove them. You could definitely slice into these, but that's really, really high heat. We also have scallions or green onions, and we're gonna use the entirety of this. I know most folks tend to use either the whites or the greens. Many formerly oppressed cultures tend to use all of a spice. You know, there's not much waste that happens. And then the two things that make a Caribbean curry, or a Jamaican curry in particular, very distinct is the use of fresh thyme. And then I think most importantly, pimento. So I have two kinds of pimentos here. These were sent to me by my aunt in a compound in Jamaica. I also have Curio's newer offering, which is a high noon pimento out of Jamaica as well. So pimento is what makes a Jamaican curry a distinct curry. If you were in Trinidad, what would make it distinct is a herb called shadow benny or ricao. It has a similar flavor profile as coriander or cumin, but it tends to be a longer, more fresh herb. So I'm going to do two things tonight. We're going to make a curry together, as in an actual curry dish. We're going to start by blending a curry. And the curry we're going to blend tonight is primarily, I want to say, a Caribbean-centric Anglo-Indian. And Anglo-Indian because the British colonized both Jamaica and India. So the British, who tended to make curry popular, explorers, cartographers, former plantation owners, they were both in India and in the Caribbean. They bring that food back and forth. As traders went between Jamaica and the Caribbean and also in India, they brought those spices with them. So for this curry, I'm going to use a few things. Pimento in particular, which tends not to be in very many curries. That's what makes a Jamaican curry very distinct. I have grounded cumin. I think this is the camera I'm using. Yep. I have grounded cumin. I have powdered onion and also garlic. I have those two things here. And then what makes our curry distinct, which is different from Southeast Asia, which is a red or green curry, is turmeric. So turmeric, similar to ginger, is a root that's been dried, almost lost it, dried, pounded into this very bright, highly potent spice. What I have here is my actual curry mixture that I tend to make a batch and last probably 6 months to a year. It's very shelf stable. This is a blend of all the spices I talked to you earlier about. Cloves could also be an addition. Grounded ginger is another addition. Peppercorns. And then based on your spice preference or your heat preference, grounded chilies, or I think Claire is now carrying grounded habaneros. Yes. So if you're, and I'll send the recipe over to you, but if you're trying to make a curry from scratch, you're at home, you're trying to make a curry powder, we're gonna go ahead and mix all these spices together. So pimento, I recommend about 10 to 14 or so for this recipe. And let's call that 10 to 14. I'm using a mortar and pestle, which is very traditional. My grandpa had one of these. It was definitely like a tree stump with a wooden thing that he pounded. And I have whole pimento. Pimento is the same thing you tend to call allspice. It's a pet peeve of mine, forgive me. Allspice refers to a blend of spices, including pimento, but pimento berries, they grow somewhat similar to a coffee pod. So it has a flesh on the outside, which is dried off. They're a dark purple berry that's dried off. As a child, my job was to make sure the pimento didn't get wet in the summertime. So you had to stay inside or stay outside in the backyard and watch the clouds in case it was about to rain. And you have to run as fast as you can to make sure the pimento came in before your grandma lost her entire crop, right? Not a bad job for a kid. I'm gonna add to that a little bit of onion. I'm definitely gonna add my cumin. So, and I promise you there are measurements for this. I just haven't been a measuring kind of person. After making these for a while, you have an idea of what a teaspoon looks and feels like, but there are measurements in the recipe you'll receive. Ginger. So this would also have been grounded ginger. About an inch would be about a teaspoon. And then pretend I put salt in here, pretend I put pepper in there. These are being grounded. We seen that?
Looks great.
Now the smell is amazing. Those pimento berries were held whole. I mean, they're definitely dried, but as you grind those out, that oil similar to clove oil, that pimento oil is released, and those blend very nicely with the other spices. And then for the actual making of an Anglo-Indian, again, Anglo-Indian being primarily of British influence, but from the Indian subcontinent. And in this case, because of our influence was from the Madras region, which is now I think called China. And then that's blended in. I wish you could smell this. So that's blended in. So again, very bright in turmeric. Say a Southeast Asian like Cambodia, Thailand, or Vietnam, those curries tend to be green or red. Green curries tend to have fresh paste-like consistency. So it would be lemongrass, it would be fresh chilies, it would be lime, it would be fresh onions. But because of the region that I am working with today, is primarily a British influenced Indian style curry. And there we have a fresh brownie curry. Again, this can be stored room temperature, you know, a sealed jar, a Ziploc bag, or in your fridge. So. All right. Now, if you want to go the route of taking the fresh turmeric, you could definitely, I'm gonna start my flame so we can make sure we have a finished meal. Take some fresh, a knob an inch or so of turmeric, you know, peel this down, and you're also grounding this out with fresh onions, with chilies, with fresh garlic, and that will be a pasty consistency, very bright in color because of the fresh turmeric, and that could be used immediately or stored in the refrigerator for a few days. It doesn't have as long a shelf life as you would with the curry powder. All right, do we do Q&A at this point, or do we continue into our demo?
You can continue on unless anyone has any questions about making the curry spice. I can also, you mentioned the comfort curry. I'll just say a little bit about that, because that is also sort of an Anglo influenced yellow curry. It is a sweeter, milder curry than some of the Madras curries that you'll get in India. So it doesn't have any chilies in it, hence the word comfort. Although, frankly, some people find hot spices comforting. So, you know, but it has a lot of turmeric. It has a bit of cinnamon. It also has some unusual ingredients like caraway and nigella, but as you mentioned, I think the pimento berries is the key element to make it Jamaican, so that you know, you can adapt it by adding that.
Exactly. And so most cuisines, starting with the French, well, not starting, but the French in particular, have a mirepoix, so a distinct base for most dishes. You know, if you're from the South, like Cajun or Creole, it's a holy trinity, so celery, onions, peppers. Ours tend to be scallion, green onions, thyme, and pimento. In the market, they're sold as tri-pack. So you'd find a sprig or two of thyme tied to some scallion with a tiny bag of pimento. It's like a slightly offensive. The wife starter pack, because on Sundays, if you're making rice and beans, you just pop that proportion into your pan and you're ready to go. But it's like our trinity of sorts, and definitely habanero as being what you're supposed to work with a distinct spice flavor. So for the curry, the ingredients you'll get, or the recipe you'll get, will tell you in particular how to go about it. I'm going by memory. One of the things I think in particular when it comes down to Indian or diaspora cooking is to bloom your spices. Definitely putting your spices onto your cold raw chicken is fine. You get some marinade, but you want to heat those oils up that are in your spices. So I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of oil.
Tamika, while you're doing that,
Yeah.
there's a question coming from Jocelyn, and she said she recently heard about a curry called Chief Curry. She thinks it's a brand and maybe Jamaican. Does it compare? Is it similar to what you just mixed?
Excellent question. So Chief, in the Caribbean, we have a little rivalry, right? big islands versus small islands. Now the big islands, Trinidad and Jamaica are the bigger islands. And so Chief is Trinidad. It's a particular family in Trinidad, an Indian family in Trinidad. It's probably 50 years old, who knows, very good, high quality. It's a little bit darker. The brand I use is called Better Pack, that is from Jamaica. It's higher in turmeric, but both Chief and Better Pack are really high quality curries. But again, if we had on campus, I went to University of West Indies, and we had tons of Jamaicans and Trinities. We compare our curries based on if you're a Chief person or a Better Pack person. But Chief is definitely very high quality, lower in turmeric. It's not as bright yellow, but definitely very good quality. Great question. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and bloom. Let me just make sure I'm ready for this. I'm gonna grab all my utensils. So that curry blend that we just made. Oh, this is heavy. You want to heat the oil so it's shimmering but not burning. Are you seeing my camera too over here? I'm gonna go this. How's that?
Yep, perfect.
I'm gonna move very quickly on this one. Then my onions go in. So in here I had onions. I also had crushed garlic. Probably shouldn't touch that. For this recipe, I have both carrots and potatoes that I mentioned earlier. So again, really speaking to being authentic in how I present this dish. You know, meat is definitely a seasoning for many families who are poorer. So you definitely want to fill things in like chicken or fish with high carbs or vegetables. So you wouldn't find someone, you know, having a large chunk of meat per se, but you'd have potatoes or carrots or any kind of vegetables that kind of fill that meat dish out. So I still practice it at home where I add potatoes or carrots to most of my meals.
Could you add beans as well, Tamika?
You probably wouldn't add beans to this kind of curry. I know folks are doing curried goat these days with white beans. That's a newer age. I love when recipes evolve, but traditionally, so to speak, would be potatoes or carrots or anything that kind of fills. Christophine as well, chocho. Christophine would be an addition for this. So I'm gonna saute these onions until they're softened. I'm not looking for any browning on this, definitely just softening these up. Now let them go for a while. And then we have our fresh spring onions, we have our carrots and potatoes that I mentioned earlier. Our thyme goes in, it's also fished out at the end. Our habaneros, I treat this as whole. It goes in whole, it's removed towards the end. I have a little bit of stock, well, hot water in this case, that's going. You could have used coconut milk. That's the newer, I want to say more expensive addition, but definitely adds a different flavor profile to this dish. But traditionally it would be hot water. In particular, the water that you use to make your dumplings or other kind of like brown provisions like yam, you just scoop some of that while it's boiling into your dish. So I'm sauteing this. I'm going to increase my onion heat and have this going for a while. So while that's going, I like to nerd out, right? So I was reading today about this amazing, what makes an Anglo curry an Anglo curry. And there happens to be an Indian restaurant in the 60s in Britain that made a list. So anything that's prescriptive always makes me a little bit nervous. But he talks about an Indian curry or an Anglo-Indian curry never has raisins or apples or any kind of sweet additions. It talks about definitely not piling your curry onto your rice. As a rule, it's served separately and your rice is scooped with your curry. He had like very, very serious rules about how to eat. So the British weren't used to a curry dish, right? It talks about never using flour or cornstarch as a thickener, but using coconut milk, cream, or any milk-based like yogurt as a thickener, but never ever flour or cornstarch or any of those thickeners. All right, so I have these sauteing, and those are ready to go. Can you see that? I'm gonna go ahead and put my chicken in. Now in the recipe you have, I've asked you to definitely season the chicken and have it kind of marinate overnight. What you really want to do here is make sure you're stirring I get a little bit of sear on that chicken. You're gonna start smelling those beautiful spices coming together. I'm gonna let it go for about a minute so I can have each piece kind of brown. The joy of using a new stove means your timing is a little bit different from your home stove. So that goes very nicely. I'm gonna probably add a little bit more curry on this. I'm not getting that color I'm looking for. I'll measure some more out. Again, so let's go back to the thyme. So thyme in particular, if you're using fresh thyme, that goes in whole, and you can fish that out towards the end. You can also just go ahead and remove all the thyme leaves and then chop those finely.
Tamika, why do you think thyme is such a signature herb in Jamaican cuisine?
My thing is that it's hard to eat, easy to grow. I mean, you usually have a thyme bush hanging out in your backyard somewhere. Thyme and mint in particular, it just goes into everything. Whether it works or not, we just toss it in everything. But it's a very hearty, woody, easy herb, not as delicate as very many others, like parsley, for example. Thyme, which is also part of the logo for my company, I've done some research, one of the oldest herbs that was found in the Egyptian culture. So it's just really one of those hearty, can be a tea, an elixir, can be used for potions. The thyme is one of those things that's really hearty for me.
Tamika, we have a question for you. What level of heat do you have that on?
I have it on 8 on a scale that goes from 1 to 10, so that feels like medium high for me.
Yeah.
I want it to have a sear. If I'm too low with this, then I'll start to have some condensing. Let me have some water, some juice in here, some liquids. I'm not looking for liquids just yet. I do want to sear a little bit, not burn, but definitely have that color darken. I mentioned before, I think this has to be a little bit more curry. My demonstration curry wasn't sufficient. I'm going to use my older blend that I had pre-made before. The recipe says 2 tablespoons. That was 2 tablespoons, give or take. Now, this could have easily also been a plant-based protein. The cooking time would have been definitely less time. So this could have been tofu. So again, searing that tofu. It could have been chickpeas. The chickpeas you'll handle a little bit different based on whether it's a canned chickpeas or it's dried chickpeas. But the same application could be used for both of those plant-based protein options. If this was a curried goat, your cook time is looking more like 1.5 to 2 hours, to be honest. So that's a more involved, again, celebration meal that takes quite a while.
Is that because the goat is a fresh meat and it just takes, and it's lean and it takes to couple?
Goats are hard-working animals. They tend to have tough muscles. We tend to curry the leg of a goat or the shank. So those are hard, very muscular pieces of meat that takes a very long time. So while this is going, I kind of talk about, so again, curry is one of those things that's found globally. This one is Anglo-Indian. Japan has a katsu curry. Definitely countries that were formerly colonized like Mauritius, South Africa, they tend to have a similar curry profile to those Anglo-Indian influences. And so they definitely have a turmeric-based curry that is heavy on sauce, but also lower in fresh ingredients, mostly dried ingredients. So that color is coming up beautifully. Are folks seeing that? I'm getting that really nice sear on it. And so once it's seared and the color comes in nicely, we're gonna do 2 things. I'm gonna add those onions, those potatoes and those carrots. Again, those are just fillers. You can definitely do that as an optional offering. And once those go in, for a faster recipe, you can go blanched or boil those carrots. I'm using dark meat here on purpose. You know, chicken breast is a delicacy in most more global South countries. So dark meat, leg and thighs tend to be the option. Very rarely is it boneless. So this is like, if my mom saw me making this, she'd roll her eyes at me. She's like, chicken must have bone. So it's a delicacy, or it's a more privileged thing to have a deboned, skinless protein, right? We're very accustomed to eating fifth cuts, so offals, so kidneys, livers, feet, head. I used to cry on Sundays when my mom made curried goat's head or cow feet, because again, formerly oppressed countries, fifth cut offals are what you tend to have as your offering. So bone in will take a little bit longer. If I did a dark meat, say a thigh, I'd say probably up the recipe by a pound just to account for waste. And then once you have those bones in, you can just work around them. It offers more flavor with that bone marrow. Skin on is an option for some folks, and that's fried a little bit more deeply to get a crisp on that skin. Okay. So tons of offerings for this recipe, but I'm using dark meat thighs here, boneless and skinless. Are you seeing that here?
Yeah, it looks great.
So I'm going to set all my ingredients in. I'm going to go ahead and add my thyme whole. You have definitely gone ahead and put some twine on this and kind of tie. Most Caribbean dishes are very rustic. You can just throw things in. I'm going to cover this up. I'm going to put a little bit of stock. So you're looking for enough, not to cover the entire product, but just enough to allow for a simmer. You want to have a boil initially, so a rapid bubbling. And once you have that rapid bubbling, you're reducing your heat to get to a simmer. In terms of pan I'm using, I'm purposely using my Dutch oven. This was found at Tropical Foods in Boston. But you want to use a cast iron skillet or any kind of heavy bottom pan. This is a Dutch oven, you know, somewhat heavy, not as heavy as a cast iron skillet, but the rounded bottom allows for that spread nicely. I wouldn't say use like a frying pan for this. You want to have some depth. It's similar to a braised item. You want to have some liquid up the sides, and you want to make sure a lid is on for this. So this will go for 20 to 25 minutes. I mean, I did have a sear on it for a few minutes. You can see the simmering happening, little tight bubbles in the center. Not sure if you're seeing all the way in. Can you highlight that?
If you want to, you can move your iPhone and like hold it over top, maybe.
All right, let's do it. So I have, ooh, yeah, we're there.
Oh wait, I spotlighted the wrong one. Hang on.
No worries.
Hold on. AV department. There we go.
Okay, so your potatoes are in, your carrots are in. I tossed that entire sprigs of thyme. I can fish those out. I'm gonna toss this entire Scotch habanero in it. Again, it doesn't give you, let me just angle this. It will extract the flavors of the habanero, but not too much of the heat. The heat really lies in the seeds, and that's why I'm keeping it whole here. We have our simmering happening here. I'm gonna close this down. At this point, I'm on a 5, which is really the middle of the ground. So a medium, not medium high, but medium like low for this one. So while that goes, I have to find a way to fill in my time, right? Are there any other questions? I could also just talk about curry all day.
I have a question about the habanero.
Yeah. Sure.
Scotch bonnet. So if you were using a dried chili powder, like how much would you put in as an equivalent to like your fresh one that's like steeping?
So the fresh one just now doesn't offer much heat. It offers the essence of a habanero. If you ever had a habanero, it has a distinct, I like to say it's a cross between chilies and like a sweet pepper. So you're tasting that peppery flavor without all the heat. If you're using grounded or powder, you will have some heat. I'd probably say a quarter teaspoon. It's based on preference. I like medium heat. I don't like too much heavy heat, so I think about a quarter teaspoon is good.
Cool. And we have another question from Nora.
Yeah, hi Nora.
She says, I know that for some people, curry is kind of a loaded word.
Yes.
Talking, sorry, especially when talking about Indian cuisine. What are your thoughts on the term?
Yeah, so I am learning a lot. So for me, I was teased at school for smelling like curry or for having curry. So you made like a ham sandwich, but we had curry the night before and you fry that ham and made a sandwich. They call me curry ham. Curry is a derogatory term. So the indentured servants who were Indians primarily who came to the Caribbean lived in very poor quarters, tending to smell like curry. So for many people, they were seen as less than, right? Than those who came from other regions, like the Chinese, for example, in Caribbean in particular, were seen as being better than the Indians. So there's a heavy term there. They tend to live in like tight housing, and so the smell of curry, that's one thing. The other thing is that the British in particular had a rise in curry at some point in the 17th century, towards the 18th, 19th century, as many more Indian immigrants came and lived in tight housing quarters. The smell of curry became offensive. So it's a very loaded term to be smelling like curry. It means you're either poor Indian immigrant or just not welcomed. That is true. In very many places, curry is the equivalent of being poor, new, unwelcome, or your language isn't English. So you're correct. I think curry is being reclaimed now by very many people, but for a while it was not seen as a polite thing to have in public because of the staining from turmeric, but also because of that heavy, spicy odor, which I love, but many people think it's just too potent. Primarily people who are white, primarily people who are of Western cultures who are not familiar with spice blends. Yeah, curry evokes, I think, heavy conversation about colonization. It evokes very heavy conversation about who owns curry, so to speak, or where it comes from. There's not a culture that hasn't been touched by curry. Whether you're formerly colonized or not, at some point, curry was snuck into some part of your heritage. What drink best complements this dish? I like mango lassi because the yogurt kind of eases the spice. I say don't do ginger beer in curry.
Why is that?
That's the spice from the ginger beer and the heat from the curry.
So much.
It's painful. So I like a yogurt base, like a mango lassi or any kind of fruit drink. I can't say I've ever had liquor or wines with curry. I'm not a fancy curry kind of girl, but I tend to have a mango lassi or something that kind of soothes and absorbs, like passing the spices.
I have heard from wine experts, I'm not one, but that a sweeter wine is good with like a spicy dish.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, just like the mango lassi. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. All right, so while this is going, just because, oh, that's going very nicely. I can smell it. And towards the end, you want to definitely taste your product and adjust for salt and pepper to make sure it, meets your preference. Today I was just going around and just like doing some research, and there are tons. For a while in Japan, during 2000, I think 1 to 7, there was a curry museum exhibition that was the most popular exhibit in Japan for a while. People were just so fascinated by all the curries around the world, including the German curry sausage, the currywurst. It was a huge sausage made from pork and sprinkled with curry and onions as a German version of how they interpret a curry dish. So curry, I think, has gone very many places. Definitely came out of India in the way we've done it here, which is a powder. It exists in very many places, Southeast Asia in particular. It tends to be a paste. It tends to be a cooking method. So anything braised in a heavy paste is a curry in many places. But I think in the Indian subcontinent, in the way they spread throughout the British former colonies, to the Caribbean in particular, it's a turmeric-based spice blend, added to proteins and vegetables, braised, and usually accompanied with a starch of some sort. So both a method and a spice blend. Stop touching my pot. I'm gonna give it a stir and just make sure I adjust it for spices. Now I tend to have a lot of sauce happening here because I'm definitely knowing I'm not ready. I'm gonna have this sauce reduced. Again, if you're looking to thicken this, according to Verswami, who is the owner of one of the first fine Indian restaurants in Britain, do not add flour, do not add cornstarch. Instead, add coconut milk or a milk-based product. You could also, the technique, which is really super helpful, remove some potatoes and then mash those in a container and then add them back into your curry. You're trying to add a new, say you're gluten-free, for example, you're trying to add anything, or you don't want to use coconut or a milk-based product, you can definitely just take those potatoes that are partially cooked. You mash those with a rice or with a fork, and you introduce those back into your curry. So those go back here. All right, we have a few more minutes on this. Again, 20 to 25 minutes. Dark meat definitely takes a little bit longer than white meat to cook. You want to have that bean, like, you know, fall off the bone, although there's no bone here, but you want it to be really, really well done. You want all those curry spices to be infused all the way into the juices, but also into the meat or the tofu or the beans that you're doing. What other vegetable you do for? So curried potatoes is pretty good on its own. Eggplant lends itself to a good curry. Chickpeas, a chana. So chickpeas curry tends to be called a chana. That cooks very nicely in curry. I have done tofu. I've done eggplant, tofu, beans, Christophine, which is chocho, are called chocho. Any hearty vegetable that can be braised for a while. Nothing too delicate, so definitely not your greens, definitely not. I love a summer squash. That's newer for me as I moved to Boston. So any kind of those hearty squashes can be curried as well. I saw a question just now, or a comment, and I don't think I can read that far. I'm gonna pull our plate out for this. Was there another question on there, Claire?
Yeah, our friend Nancy asks if there's any, she had not been aware of any sort of negative connotations to the word curry. And she wondered if in your readings, if you've come up across a more sensitive or politically appropriate term.
For curry?
Mm.
I mean, this is more so my opinion. I mean, what I read, it spoke to the decline of curry, so how the newcomers was part of the reason, because initially British housewives would show off their skills by seeing they can make a curry, or their servants could make a curry. It was more so through immigration and new people coming in. I haven't seen a change. I mean, as a person who's from a culture that's heavy in curry, I like to reclaim it. I like to operate on a, you know, white tablecloth somewhere, but I haven't seen any alternative references. I think curries are becoming even more popular as folks are understanding like global cuisine. So I don't know for a fact, but I don't think there's an alternative description to curry.
One thing I might be able to add to that conversation is that our friend Suman Shah, who does also teach for us sometimes, who like you has lived here for many years and is bringing home and then into an American kitchen. She has talked about it a little bit and said that basically in the way Indian dishes are named, nothing is called a curry. It's this with these spices, or it's this with tomato, but it's not curry. That curry is an Anglo British designation for a type. So for them, it's basically a technique, like you said, like a stewed or braised dish with something that's like a gravy and spice. But they would at home never call it a curry. But she said here in American English, she would refer to something as curry.
A curry, yeah. Yeah, I came across probably a list of 18 or so. A vindaloo is a spicy curry, or a korma is a milk-based curry. So I definitely saw that the Indian subcontinent had a list of names that speaks to the kinds of curries. But I think that's why I was really kind of honing in on this being the Anglo-Indian. It's a colonial leftover, right? Of how curry spread across the former colonies. That's a fascinating topic. I'd love to dive into a little bit more as to how is curry being reclaimed by those who've been offended or being, you know, labeled for the use of curry. Yeah. All right, so while we're watching this go, I'm just gonna put a few things away. And for what I serve this with, I mean, rice is a classic. So white rice, basmati rice, any kind of rice just steamed with butter, a little bit of salt. I mentioned, I think, in what you receive for the recipe, ground provisions. So ground provisions refers to any kind of tuber or anything that grows on the ground. So yams, not quite potatoes, but more so the heavy yellow tuber that comes out of West Africa. Steamed potato or stewed potatoes. It could also be served with green bananas. So boiled green bananas, boiled green plantains. And that's a very hearty, like a heavy lunchtime offering in most regions, right? So those who are laborers, who are working with, you know, their hands, who are manual workers, a curry with a side of greens of any sort has been steamed, and then ground provision would be served. My grandpa in particular, as a farmer, if you serve him curry with rice, he says that's a town food, meaning like a more metropolitan thing to do, because curry is seen as a hearty meal that keeps you working for a while. So he would do green bananas, boiled yams, boiled potatoes, or boiled dumplings. And dumplings in this case was heavily influenced to the Chinese experience in Jamaica, but it's just really flour, water, and salt has been rolled into like balls and then boiled, and that would hold you for a while, right? So again, two very distinct influences who came as indentured servants. So the Chinese and the Indians came around at the same time, and then curry and dumplings have been married as like a laborer's meal for those who worked on farms or worked on any kind of manual spaces. So I'm always fascinated by how those two things came together based on immigration, based on migration, or based on forced labor in this instance. All right, so our curry looks good. I'm gonna just pull my camera here again. We have all those spices going. I added my green onions towards the end. Definitely adds a very beautiful color. I'll pull the thyme later on. Again, my juices are still, oh, right there. My liquid is definitely still a little bit too runny, so the consistency is not where I want it to be. I'm gonna pull some potatoes just to demonstrate that method, where I pull the potatoes, I'm gonna mash those and then make it into a thickening agent. I'm gonna grab a fork to kind of fish some of those out.
It looks so good.
Yeah, it smells good. So my potatoes are cooked. You're seeing that. I'll pull those out to thicken. I'm choosing not to use coconut milk here. I really wanted to show you like the, you know, the original kind of like low budget. Coconut milk is definitely a more delicate addition of fat that, at least in my experience, came later on, probably in the 90s. We had canned or powdered coconut milk that could be readily available. Prior to that period, you have, if you want coconut milk, you have to get a coconut, crack it open, grate it, make the milk, right? So it wasn't as readily available to be tossed into every single dish. That was a Sunday offering. The labor tends to limit what you use. You have to make it really, really from scratch, and you're not. Right. I think I have enough potatoes. I'm just gonna squish those like a, you know, a ricer, and then that starch will thicken up. I made a boo-boo. So again, you can see that starch on top, and that goes folded into perfect. Definitely thickening up. The consistency get better. Now, what you're trying to avoid is breaking that habanero. I can actually remove it at this stage. So it went in plump, it went in full. It's now steamed or cooked. So some of that flavor was extracted, but not as spicy because the seeds were intact and not exposed. All right, so we are right at the end. So I have the consistency I'm looking for. It's like a gravy-like consistency. It's not too thick. It's not running around your plate. That thickening agent gave you that sauce. I'm gonna grab a fresh plate to bake this for us. don't have a bowl anymore. This is the reason you wear pants on Zoom, because I had to go back there just now, right?
But it's too hot.
This is the reason you want to wear a full outfit on Zoom in the event you need to go and grab something from the dishwasher, and you are not exposing yourself to all the folks on TV. All right. Excellent. So I'm gonna go ahead and plate this. So again, from start to finish, cook time was about 25 minutes. Let's pretend I pull all those time pieces out. My carrots are cooked all the way through. My potatoes are cooked all the way through. I'm gonna go ahead and I have a pile of rice on here. That would be great. I think that's sufficient. And then I want to make sure that some of that really thick liquid comes in here. All right. So this is my curry chicken. Again, it could have been any protein, any hearty protein. It could have been tofu, less cook time. It could have definitely been, some chickpeas. It could have also just been a goat, which would take a lot longer. I'm thinking 2 to 3 hours from scratch, from start to finish. It could have also been eggplant, chickpeas as chana, and there you have it, my curry goat. I'm gonna remove this stuff. I said curry goat, right? Yeah. Because curry goat is always on my mind. So it's not curry goat, it's curry chicken. So dark meat.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna tell tales out of school because everyone should be so impressed. Tamika moved to this kitchen. Stop me if I'm wrong. This weekend, and look.
It's not my kitchen. I'm borrowing the kitchen.
Oh, I was like, holy mackerel! She's got that like completely organized.
No, I'm with a friend. It's a borrowed kitchen that I learned this morning.
Oh, well, it looks great.
Yeah, it's a borrowed kitchen. So thank you for your patience on that. But here we have our curried, again, dark meat, chicken thighs, boneless, carrots and potatoes, which is very traditional to kind of fill in that proteins that every family member gets a little bit of meat. It's in the Anglo-Indian tradition because of that colonized British, Jamaica being that. Post-slavery indentured servants came to our region and left us with amazing, amazing delicacies, such as curry and caldo and different stews. So this has been a staple. When I was in college, my mom would take me curry, goat, or chicken during exam periods because she knew it would make me pass my exams. So serve with rice, and you're gonna ground provisions, plantains. If you had a roti, so a roti shell, you'd wrap this in a roti like a burrito style, tuck the ends in and kind of bite into it. It's a street food in some places. Jamaica, Guyana, and Trinidad are the places that have very heavy Indian influence and have left us with this amazing dish. So thank you guys so much.
Tamika, I have a question about cooking goat. And if you used goat in this recipe, would you do the whole cook time, the whole braise on stovetop, or at some point does it move into an oven?
It moves into the oven, definitely a newer practice as folks have oven. Usually goat, because of you're trying to conserve your propane. So most houses are using propane in the Caribbean. So you do a old tire, charcoal or wood, and that's outside for half a day. Mm-hmm. It's just too costly to be indoors in the heat with goat. So goat tends to be, again, celebration food. You'd make a fire, you'd open pit or a old tire rim, and that goes outside for half a day and it's ready for the celebration in the evening. So when we have curry goat being served in most restaurants in the US, it's because we can afford to, right? We can afford to use electrical ovens and everything else. But in the Caribbean, it's a very expensive undertaking to braise a goat for 3 or 4 hours. It's an outdoor thing that happens a couple times a year for celebration.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Tamika.
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
Sure, who's on here? just nosy.
Yeah, I can turn you off spotlight and you can see the whole, there's always like me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Here we go.
I hope folks try this recipe. I hope it's approachable. Again, if you're not a fresh eater, it could be a plant-based option. Again, curry is one of those things you can ramp up as you get more comfortable. So start low, curry a few things. It's definitely a spicier, but the heat can be adjusted based on your preference.
Very cool.
I like to see people's faces. I'm still adjusting to teaching virtually where there are no humans in the room to talk to. It's a hi human. I see babies. Hi baby. Any other questions for folks? Right. If you really want to nerd out on curry, there's a book called Curry: A Global History. If you really want to nerd out, it kind of breaks the world down in different regions. It starts with India's subcontinent. They also talk through the influence across from empires and how curry has just been a ubiquitous kind of spice or cooking method across our world. So we're going to nerd out as a place to nerd out. Thank you so much, Claire, for having me.
Oh,
so
thank
fun to do this with
you.
you. Again, the mattress curry is definitely, if you're not going the Better Pepper Chief, the two rivaling curries, the mattress comfort curry I think is an excellent. It speaks to the very similar style. I'd add some more pimentos, which we now carry.
Yes.
And maybe some chilies.
Yeah.
It's more of a more delicate, like softer side, but I add some more spices if you want to do that. But these are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The honey and pimento. Yeah.
And for everyone,
I want to eat it.
We will send you the recipe for this beautiful curry via email tomorrow. We will also send a couple links. Oh yeah, this is the part where you're like, oh, it's
yeah. I'm gonna eat on camera.
I love it. We're all so jealous. We'll send the recipe tomorrow along with a couple links. We do carry the pimento berries and some Scotch bonnet that is from High Noon Spice. Gary imports Scotch bonnets from his family farm in Treasure Beach, Jamaica, and dehydrates them. So they're super, super flavorful. In case you have trouble finding the fresh ones, it's a nice thing to have on hand.
Yeah. I'm gonna demonstrate consistency. So you want your curry, if you can see, you want your sauce to not be too runny. You see that line I do? If your sauce is running back too quickly, it needs to be thickened a little bit more.
Good tip.
I hope that was not too assertive. But yeah, definitely you want your sauce to not be too runny. So have a nice white, well, it's gone now, but you don't want to have a really runny viscosity. You want to have a little bit thick. So good job, Tamika.
Yay. So Nora says, maybe you can read this too. What sort of fresh chili do you recommend if you can't find Scotch bonnet?
I use crushed red pepper flakes. Honestly, bird peppers are good. I wouldn't use like a jalapeno because it has a distinct taste. I use cayenne pepper, to be honest. If you really want to get fancy, dried peri-peris, if you're West African, somewhat similar. And habaneros are sold in tropical if you're in the Boston area and many other Caribbean or African markets. They sell like really big packets of them. You can freeze them or you can blend them so you have them for a while. Again, the seed is where the spice is. So you want to be careful to cut around those seeds if you're not ready for that level of spice.
Yeah, great.
So cayenne, red pepper flakes, peri-peri, habaneros.
Very cool.
All right.
Well, thank you,
everyone. Thank you so
much.
I look forward to seeing you guys again somewhere, online or otherwise.
All right. Well, thank you so much for cooking tonight and for sharing your stories. It was really wonderful.
Thank you, Claire, for having me. Thank you, Suzanne. Bye, guys. Good to meet you all. Take care.
All right. Have a great night, everyone.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.